Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a bustling hospital emergency department, alarms beeping, nurses rushing past with medication carts, residents frantically reviewing charts. The controlled chaos that saves lives every single day. Now picture a doctor, confident, established, respected, publicly humiliating a nurse in front of the entire staff, his voice dripping with condescension as he questions her competence, dismisses her input, and treats her like she doesn't belong there. The nurse stands quietly absorbing the insult with professional grace, offering only a brief, measured response. Most people would assume that's the end of it. The doctor walks away victorious, his authority unchallenged, his ego intact. But what if I told you that this quiet nurse he just humiliated wasn't what she seemed? What if his arrogance just cost him everything? His reputation, his position, and possibly his entire career? What if the woman he dismissed with such contempt held more power in that hospital than he could ever imagine? This isn't just a story about workplace hierarchy. It's about the dangerous cost of prejudice, the silent strength of those underestimated, and the moment when karma arrives with devastating precision. Before we dive into what happened next, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you believe respect should be earned through competence, not demanded through arrogance, hit that subscribe button. What unfolds next will leave you absolutely speechless. The emergency department at Riverside Memorial Hospital was operating at full capacity on that sweltering Tuesday afternoon in July. Every bed was occupied, every physician was triple booked, and every nurse was running on their 6th consecutive hour without a break. Dr. Marcus Thornton strode through the organized chaos with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his entire career. At 52, he was a veteran cardiologist with 23 years at Riverside, a corner office, and a reputation that preceded him into every room, though not always for the right reasons. He stopped abruptly at the central nurses' station, his expensive Italian leather shoes squeaking against the freshly mopped floor. His eyes landed on a black woman in navy blue scrubs, her natural hair pulled back into a neat bun, quietly reviewing a patient chart with intense focus. "You there?" Dr. Thornton said sharply, not bothering with pleasantries or even her name. "Nurse." The woman looked up, her warm brown eyes meeting his with calm professionalism. "Yes, doctor." "The patient in Bay 7, Mrs. Chen, why hasn't her medication been administered yet?" "I wrote those orders over an hour ago." The nurse, whose name tag read L. Williams, RN, responded evenly, "Mrs. Chen's medication was held per protocol, doctor. Her blood pressure dropped to 88/52, which falls below the parameters for administering—" "I don't recall asking for a medical lesson," Dr. Thornton interrupted, his voice rising enough to draw glances from nearby staff members. "I asked why my orders weren't followed. Are you incapable of following simple instructions?" The emergency department seemed to pause imperceptibly. Conversations lowered to whispers. Residents exchanged uncomfortable glances. A medical student suddenly found the floor tiles fascinating. Nurse Williams took a measured breath before responding. "Dr. Thornton, I'm following established safety protocols. Mrs. Chen's vitals indicate—" "What you're indicating is incompetence," Dr. Thornton snapped, his face flushing. "How long have you been a nurse? A month? 2? Because clearly you don't understand basic medication administration." The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Several nurses at the station stiffened visibly, their expressions shifting from surprise to poorly concealed anger. A young Filipino nurse named Carlos muttered something under his breath. The charge nurse, Janet, looked like she wanted to intervene but seemed frozen by the sheer audacity of the moment. Nurse Williams, however, remained remarkably composed. Her voice stayed level, professional, almost gentle in contrast to Dr. Thornton's aggression. "I've been a registered nurse for quite some time, doctor, and I'm confident in my assessment. Mrs. Chen's safety is my priority, just as I'm sure it's yours." Her response, calm, measured, refusing to take the bait, seemed to infuriate Dr. Thornton even more. "Your assessment?" He let out a derisive laugh. "You're a nurse, not a physician. You don't make assessments. You follow orders? Mine. Do you understand? Or do I need to use smaller words?" The insult was blatant, humiliating, and witnessed by at least a dozen staff members. The atmosphere in the ED had gone from uncomfortable to absolutely suffocating. Nurse Williams set down her pen with deliberate care. She looked Dr. Thornton directly in the eyes, not challenging, not aggressive, but with a quiet strength that somehow made his bombast seem even more ridiculous. "I understand perfectly, Dr. Thornton," she said softly. "I'll make a note of your concerns in Mrs. Chen's chart." Without another word, she returned to her documentation, effectively dismissing him with her silence. Dr. Thornton stood there for a moment, seemingly surprised that his tantrum hadn't achieved the desired effect. Then, with a huff of indignation, he turned on his heel and marched toward the physician's lounge, muttering loud enough to be overheard. "Unbelievable. The quality of nursing staff these days is absolutely abysmal." As soon as he disappeared through the double doors, the nurses' station exploded in whispered conversations. "Did he seriously just—" Carlos began. "Same old Marcus," Janet said quietly, shaking her head. "Someone needs to report him to HR, again." But Nurse Williams said nothing. She simply continued reviewing her patient charts with the same focused intensity as before, as though the entire humiliating encounter had never happened. What Dr. Thornton didn't know, what he couldn't have known because his arrogance blinded him to everything beyond his own inflated ego, was that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his professional life. The incident at the nurse's station wasn't an isolated event. In fact, it was disturbingly typical for Dr. Marcus Thornton. As the day shift transitioned to evening, staff members gathered in small clusters, their conversations inevitably circling back to the confrontation. "That's the third time this month I've seen him do something like that," said Maria, a surgical nurse with 15 years at Riverside. "And it's always—" She stopped herself, but the others knew what she meant to say. "It's always nurses of color, always women, always people he perceives as beneath him." Carlos pulled out his phone, scrolling through his notes app. "I've been keeping track," he admitted quietly, "just for my own sanity, to make sure I'm not imagining the pattern." He turned the screen so the others could see. The list was extensive. March 15th. Dr. Thornton publicly berated Nurse Jamal Washington for questioning a medication dosage that was later found to be incorrect. April 30, he demanded that Nurse Keisha Johnson, a 15-year veteran, fetch him coffee, since she clearly wasn't busy enough with actual nursing. May 22nd, he bypassed Nurse Patricia Okafor entirely during morning rounds, speaking only to the white male residents and ignoring her detailed patient updates. June 8th, he reported Nurse Williams to her supervisor for insubordination, after she correctly identified a contraindication he'd missed. The list went on, and on. "How does he keep getting away with this?" Maria asked, her frustration evident. "Doesn't anyone report him?" Janet, the charge nurse, sighed heavily. "Oh, we report him. HR has a file on Thornton thick enough to use as a doorstop, but he's protected." "Protected by what?" Carlos demanded. "By success," Janet said bitterly. "His patient outcomes are excellent. He brings in significant revenue through his private practice. He's published research. He's got connections on the hospital board. As long as he's making the hospital money and prestige, they're willing to overlook his personality defects." "You mean his racism," Carlos said bluntly. "Let's call it what it is." The group fell silent. Naming it felt dangerous, even though they all knew it was true. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, Nurse Williams, whose first name was actually Dr. Lillian Williams, though she'd chosen to work a floor shift without announcing her credentials, sat with a cup of tea reflecting on the day's events. Her internal monologue, if it could be heard, would have revealed layers of experience and exhaustion. 23 years. 23 years of proving myself over and over again. A bachelor's degree in nursing from Johns Hopkins, a master's in nursing administration from Penn, a doctorate in healthcare systems from Columbia. And still, men like Marcus Thornton see nothing but a skin color and a gender. I've been called incompetent by people who couldn't pass the NCLEX if they had the answer key. I've been talked over, dismissed, ignored, and patronized by physicians whose understanding of patient care begins and ends with their prescription pads. I've been asked if I'm the housekeeper. I've been mistaken for a cafeteria worker. I've had patients' family members request someone more qualified, code for someone white. And every single time I've smiled. I've remained professional, I've de-escalated, I've turned the other cheek, but today felt different. Maybe because I'm tired. Maybe because Dr. Thornton's arrogance finally crossed a line even I couldn't ignore. Or maybe because I know that in 48 hours, everything changes. He has no idea who I am. None of them do, and perhaps it's time they found out. Dr. Lillian Williams, soon to be announced as Riverside Memorial's new chief nursing officer, with oversight authority over clinical protocols, staff development, and yes, physician conduct, took a sip of her tea and allowed herself the smallest of smiles. The following morning began with a code blue in the cardiac care unit. Dr. Thornton was the attending cardiologist, and the emergency brought out both his considerable skills and his considerable ego. The patient was Gerald Morrison, a 68-year-old man with a history of heart disease who'd been admitted the previous evening with chest pain and irregular heartbeat. As the code blue team assembled, Dr. Thornton barked orders with the confidence of someone who'd handled hundreds of similar emergencies. Get me an EKG. Push another round of epinephrine. Someone check his potassium levels. The team moved with practiced efficiency. Residents, nurses, respiratory therapists, all working in synchronized urgency to save Mr. Morrison's life. Dr. Lillian Williams happened to be conducting a routine floor assessment when she heard the code blue announcement. She arrived at the CCU just as Dr. Thornton was ordering a specific cardiac medication. Prepare 150 milligrams of amiodarone, IV push, he commanded. Lillian's eyes immediately went to the patient's chart displayed on the computer screen near the bedside. What she saw made her blood run cold. She stepped forward quickly. Dr. Thornton, wait. Not now, he snapped without even looking at her. We're in the middle of a code. Doctor, the patient is allergic to amiodarone, Lillian said firmly, her voice cutting through the chaos. It's clearly documented in his medical history. Administering that medication could trigger anaphylactic shock. Dr. Thornton finally looked at her, his expression a mixture of annoyance and disbelief. And you are? I'm the nurse who's telling you that medication will harm your patient, Lillian replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. The resident holding the amiodarone syringe hesitated, looking between Dr. Thornton and Lillian with obvious uncertainty. Dr. Thornton's face flushed crimson. How dare you question my judgment during a code? I know what I'm doing. Check the chart, Lillian said, her voice calm but carrying absolute authority. Electronic health record, page 2, documented allergy, amiodarone. Severe reaction noted during previous hospitalization 3 years ago. One of the residents quickly pulled up the EHR on the nearby computer. His face went pale. She's right, Dr. Thornton. Documented allergy to amiodarone. Alternative medications listed. The CCU fell into a terrible, heavy silence. The only sounds were the beeping monitors and Mr. Morrison's labored breathing through the oxygen mask. Dr. Thornton's jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. His eyes bore into Lillian with undisguised fury and humiliation. Fine, he ground out. Prepare lidocaine instead, 100 milligrams. The team resumed their efforts, and within minutes, Mr. Morrison's heart rhythm stabilized. The crisis was averted, but only because someone had spoken up. As the code blue team dispersed, Dr. Thornton grabbed Lillian's arm, not gently, and pulled her into an empty consultation room. His grip was tight enough to be uncomfortable. Who the hell do you think you are? He hissed, his face inches from hers, his breath hot with anger. You don't ever contradict a physician in front of the team? Do you have any idea what you just did to my authority? Lillian calmly removed his hand from her arm. I prevented you from killing a patient, doctor. That's what I did. You made me look incompetent, he seethed. You, a nurse, publicly questioning my clinical judgment. Your judgment was wrong, Lillian said simply. The patient's allergy was clearly documented. You didn't check the chart. That's not my fault. Dr. Thornton's eyes narrowed dangerously. Let me make something very clear to you. I have been practicing cardiology for over 2 decades. I have saved more lives than you could count. I don't need some uppity nurse with a God complex telling me how to do my job. The word uppity hung in the air like a slur, and both of them knew exactly what it meant in this context. Lillian's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened. Is there anything else, Dr. Thornton? Yeah, there is, he said, pulling out his phone. I'm calling the chief of staff right now. You're going to be written up for insubordination, maybe even terminated. By the end of the day, you'll be lucky if you're still employed here." Lillian said nothing. She simply stood there waiting. Dr. Thornton dialed a number, his hands shaking with rage. "Yes, this is Dr. Marcus Thornton. I need to speak with Chief of Staff immediately. It's urgent. I have a nursing staff member who needs to be—" He stopped mid-sentence, listening to the voice on the other end of the line. His expression shifted from rage to confusion. "What do you mean there's an emergency board meeting? What meeting? Why wasn't I—" He listened for another moment, his face growing paler by the second. "I see," he said finally, his voice suddenly much quieter. "No, no, I'll, I'll call back later." He ended the call and looked at Lillian with something that might have been suspicion beginning to dawn behind his eyes. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice different now, less certain, more wary. Lillian smiled, a small, enigmatic smile that gave away nothing. "I'm exactly who I appear to be, Dr. Thornton, a nurse who cares about patient safety." She walked past him toward the door, then paused and looked back over her shoulder. "You might want to attend that board meeting," she said softly. "I have a feeling you'll find it enlightening." And with that, she left Dr. Marcus Thornton standing alone in the consultation room, a sick feeling of dread beginning to spread through his chest. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the hospital's executive conference room, the one with the mahogany table, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Dr. Thornton wasn't officially invited, but he'd heard enough whispered conversations and seen enough administrators rushing through the corridors to know something significant was happening. At 1:55 p.m., unable to contain his curiosity and growing unease, he positioned himself near the conference room, pretending to review patient files on a nearby tablet. At precisely 2:00 p.m., the hospital's senior leadership began filing in. The chief of staff, the chief financial officer, the chief medical officer, several department heads and board members in their expensive suits. And then, walking with quiet confidence between the CEO and the chief of staff, was Nurse Williams. Except she wasn't in scrubs anymore. She wore an impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit, her natural hair styled professionally, carrying a leather portfolio that looked more executive than clinical. Dr. Thornton's confusion deepened into something approaching panic. The conference room door closed, and for 45 agonizing minutes, Dr. Thornton could only imagine what was being discussed inside. When the door finally opened, the CEO emerged first, Dr. Patricia Alvarez, a formidable woman who'd turned Riverside Memorial from a struggling community hospital into one of the region's premier medical centers. She spotted Dr. Thornton immediately. "Marcus," she said, her tone friendly but carrying an undertone he couldn't quite identify. "Perfect timing. Could you join us for a moment?" It wasn't really a question. Dr. Thornton's throat went dry, but he nodded and followed her into the conference room. All eyes turned to him as he entered. The chief of staff, Dr. Raymond Foster, gestured to an empty chair. "Please sit down, Marcus." Dr. Thornton sat, his eyes involuntarily seeking out Nurse Williams. She sat at the head of the table, the power position between the CEO and CMO, her expression neutral, but her eyes knowing. CEO Alvarez cleared her throat. "Marcus, I don't believe you've been formally introduced to Dr. Lillian Williams, though I understand you two have crossed paths recently." Dr. Thornton's brain stumbled over the word doctor. PhD? Medical doctor? What kind of doctor? Dr. Williams, CEO Alvarez continued, holds a doctorate in healthcare systems administration from Columbia University, a master's in nursing administration from Penn, and has over 23 years of clinical and administrative experience. Most recently, she served as the vice president of clinical operations at Mercy General in Philadelphia. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Dr. Thornton's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "As of today," CEO Alvarez announced, glancing around the room with evident satisfaction, "Dr. Lillian Williams is Riverside Memorial Hospital's new chief nursing officer. She will have oversight authority over all nursing operations, clinical protocols, quality assurance, and," she paused meaningfully, "interdisciplinary staff conduct." The words landed like a bomb, Chief Nursing Officer, direct authority over nursing staff, oversight of physician conduct, the woman he'd publicly humiliated, the woman whose competence he'd questioned, the woman he'd called uppity just hours ago. She was now one of the most powerful administrators in the hospital. Dr. Thornton felt the blood drain from his face. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair as the full weight of his mistakes crashed down on him. Dr. Williams, Chief Williams, spoke for the first time, her voice calm and professional. Dr. Thornton and I have indeed crossed paths. In fact, he was kind enough to provide me with valuable first-hand insight into some of the cultural challenges we'll need to address in my new role. The subtle sarcasm wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Chief Medical Officer Dr. James Chen leaned forward. Marcus, we've received multiple reports over the past several months regarding your interactions with nursing staff. Complaints of disrespectful conduct, public humiliation, and what several staff members have characterized as discriminatory behavior. Dr. Thornton finally found his voice, though it came out strangled. Those are misunderstandings. I run a tight ship. I have high standards. High standards don't include verbally abusing colleagues, Chief Williams interjected quietly. High standards don't include dismissing valid medical concerns because of who's raising them. And high standards certainly don't include nearly administering a medication that could have killed a patient because you were too arrogant to check an allergy list. The room fell silent. You were there, Dr. Thornton whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. During the code, you stopped me from making a fatal error. Yes, Chief Williams confirmed. Mr. Morrison is alive because protocol was followed, because someone spoke up, not because of your expertise, but despite your negligence. CEO Alvarez took over again. Marcus, your clinical skills are not in question. Your patient outcomes have historically been excellent. But this hospital will not tolerate the kind of behavior that's been documented. Not from anyone, regardless of their position or accomplishments. Chief of Staff Foster added, effective immediately, you're being placed on a 30-day administrative review. You'll continue seeing patients, but under supervised conditions. You'll be required to complete mandatory sensitivity training, unconscious bias education, and conflict resolution counseling. Additionally, Chief Williams said, her tone leaving no room for negotiation, you'll issue formal written apologies to every nurse you've demeaned or disrespected over the past year. Those apologies will be reviewed by me personally, and going forward, any reports of similar conduct will result in immediate suspension and potential termination. Dr. Thornton sat in his chair, completely shell-shocked. 23 years of unchecked arrogance had just collided with accountability, and the impact was devastating. Do you understand these terms, Marcus? CEO Alvarez asked. He nodded mutely, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Good, you're dismissed. Dr. Thornton stood on shaking legs and walked toward the door. As he reached for the handle, Chief Williams spoke one last time. Dr. Thornton? He turned slightly, not quite able to look at her directly. Competence isn't determined by title or ego, she said softly. It's demonstrated through humility, collaboration, and respect for everyone on the team. I hope you'll learn that lesson before it's too late. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Word of Dr. Thornton's dressing down spread through Riverside Memorial Hospital with the speed of wildfire in dry brush. By evening shift change, every nurse, resident, and physician knew that the untouchable Dr. Marcus Thornton had finally been held accountable. The nurses' station, where the initial confrontation had occurred just 48 hours earlier, became an impromptu celebration site, not gleeful or vengeful, but quietly triumphant. Did you hear? Carlos whispered excitedly to Maria. She's the new CNO. The woman he tried to humiliate is literally his boss now. Janet, the charge nurse, allowed herself a rare smile. Karma isn't just a concept. Sometimes it wears a navy blue suit and carries a doctorate. But the consequences extended far beyond Dr. Thornton's bruised ego and mandatory training sessions. Chief Williams wasted no time implementing sweeping changes. Week 1. She established an anonymous reporting system for staff to document disrespectful conduct without fear of retaliation. Within 72 hours, She received 37 reports, not just about Dr. Thornton, but about a culture of hierarchy and intimidation that had festered for years. Week 2, she instituted mandatory interdisciplinary rounds, where physicians, nurses, and other healthcare providers would collaborate as equals, with explicit protocols for respectful communication. Week 3, she launched a hospital-wide training program on unconscious bias, microaggressions, and creating psychologically safe work environments. Attendance was mandatory for everyone, from housekeeping staff to the CEO. Week 4, she implemented a stop the line policy, borrowed from manufacturing safety protocols, empowering any staff member, regardless of position, to halt a procedure if they identified a safety concern, with protection from retaliation. The resistance was predictable. Several senior physicians complained that their authority was being undermined. Some argued that medicine requires hierarchy and that nurses shouldn't question doctors. Chief Williams addressed these concerns directly during a department head meeting. "Let me be crystal clear," she said, her voice carrying the weight of lived experience. "A patient coding on the table doesn't care about hierarchy, a medication error doesn't respect your title, and preventable harm doesn't discriminate. What matters, the only thing that matters, is competence, communication, and a willingness to listen to anyone who sees something wrong." She paused, letting her words sink in. "If your ego is more important than patient safety, Riverside Memorial is not the place for you." The message was received. 3 physicians requested transfers to other hospitals within the month. No one tried to stop them. For Dr. Marcus Thornton, the 30 days of administrative review were humbling in ways he never could have anticipated. His first formal apology was to Nurse Jamal Washington, whom he'd berated 3 months earlier for questioning a medication dosage. "I'm sorry," Dr. Thornton said stiffly, the words clearly uncomfortable in his mouth. "My behavior was inappropriate and unprofessional." Jamal looked at him for a long moment before responding. "Dr. Thornton, do you even remember what you said to me that day?" The doctor hesitated. Not exactly. You told me I should stick to taking temperatures and leave the real medicine to people who went to medical school," Jamal said quietly. "You said that in front of 6 residents and 4 nurses. Some of those residents now treat me differently because you undermined my credibility." Dr. Thornton's face reddened with shame. I didn't realize." "That's the problem," Jamal interrupted. "You never realize. You never think about how your words land, or who they hurt, or what damage they cause. You just throw your authority around like a weapon and expect everyone to be grateful." The conversation was painful, but necessary, and it was repeated, with variations, 11 more times as Dr. Thornton worked through his mandated apologies. By the time he reached his final apology, to Dr. Lillian Williams herself, something had shifted in him. They met in her new office, a spacious corner suite with windows overlooking the hospital's healing garden. The walls displayed her credentials, her certifications, and photographs of her with medical teams in underserved communities across 3 continents. "Chief Williams," he began, his voice significantly humbler than it had been a month ago. "I owe you an apology that goes beyond anything I can adequately express." She gestured for him to sit and waited. "I judged you based on my own prejudices and assumptions," he continued, the words clearly difficult but genuine. "I saw your race and your gender before I saw your competence. I dismissed your expertise because it threatened my ego, and I nearly harmed a patient because I was too arrogant to listen." Lillian listened without interrupting, her expression neutral. "I don't expect forgiveness," Dr. Thornton said, "but I want you to know that this experience has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself, and I'm committed, genuinely committed, to being better." Lillian was quiet for a moment before responding. "Dr. Thornton, I don't need you to grovel. What I need is for you to understand that excellence in medicine requires collaboration, humility, and respect for every single person on the healthcare team. The janitor who keeps our rooms sterile, the cafeteria worker who nourishes our patients, the nurses who are the eyes, ears, and hands of patient care." She leaned forward slightly. "You're a talented cardiologist. Your clinical skills are impressive, but talent without character is dangerous. Skills without humility are destructive, and knowledge without wisdom is worthless. Dr. Thornton nodded slowly, absorbing her words. I'm giving you a chance to prove you've learned, Lillian said. Not because I'm merciful, but because I believe people can change when they're truly motivated to do so. Don't waste it. I won't, he promised, and for the first time in his career he meant it. The changes at Riverside Memorial Hospital didn't happen overnight, but they were undeniable. Staff satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvements across all departments. Reports of workplace harassment dropped by 73%. Most significantly, medical error rates decreased by 34%, directly correlated with the new culture of open communication and psychological safety. Dr. Marcus Thornton, to everyone's surprise, became one of Chief Williams's most vocal supporters. He began teaching a monthly workshop for residents on collaborative clinical decision-making and published an article in a medical journal titled, "How Hierarchical Thinking Nearly Cost Me My Career and My Patients Their Lives." The article went viral in medical circles, sparking difficult but necessary conversations in hospitals across the country. During a hospital-wide town hall 6 months after her appointment, Chief Williams reflected on the journey. Change is uncomfortable, she told the assembled staff. It requires us to examine our assumptions, confront our biases, and acknowledge our mistakes. But discomfort is not the same as harm. In fact, sometimes discomfort is exactly what we need to grow. She looked around the room, her gaze landing briefly on Dr. Thornton, who sat in the front row taking notes. 6 months ago, this hospital had a culture problem. We had talented people doing excellent work, but we also had blind spots that put patients at risk and staff members in pain. Today we're better. Not perfect, but better. The applause was genuine and sustained. After the town hall, a young black nursing student approached Chief Williams nervously. "Dr. Williams," she said hesitantly, "I just wanted to say thank you. I almost quit nursing school last year because of experiences like what you went through. But seeing someone like you in leadership, it gave me hope that things could be different." Lillian smiled warmly and placed a hand on the student's shoulder. Things are different, and they're different because people like you, people like us, refuse to accept the status quo. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong in this profession. Medicine needs voices like yours. The student's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded gratefully before walking away. Carlos, who'd witnessed the exchange, approached Chief Williams with a grin. "You know you're basically a legend around here now, right?" Lillian laughed. "I'm not interested in being a legend. I'm interested in building systems that don't require heroes, systems where respect and safety are the default, not the exception." "Well," Carlos said, "mission accomplished. This place is totally different than it was 6 months ago." "It's a start," Lillian replied, "but the work is never finished. Complacency is where progress goes to die." News of Riverside Memorial's transformation spread beyond the hospital's walls. Medical journals requested case studies. Healthcare conferences invited Chief Williams to speak. Other hospitals began implementing similar programs. A year after the initial incident, Chief Williams was invited to keynote the National Healthcare Leadership Summit. Her speech, titled "Beyond Hierarchy, Creating Cultures of Collaborative Excellence," was attended by over 3,000 healthcare administrators and physicians. "The healthcare system has a hierarchy problem," she told the audience. "We've built our institutions on the assumption that the person with the most letters after their name has the most valuable perspective. But here's the truth. The nursing assistant who turns a patient every 2 hours to prevent bed sores has just as much insight into quality care as the surgeon who performed the operation." She paused for effect. "Excellence requires every voice. Safety demands every perspective. And equity insists that we value competence over credentials, substance over status, and humanity over hierarchy." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Dr. Thornton, who'd been invited to co-present a workshop at the same conference, watched from backstage with a mixture of admiration and residual shame. "She's remarkable," he said to a colleague beside him. "She always was," the colleague replied pointedly. "You just couldn't see it." The words stung, but they were true. The story of Dr. Marcus Thornton and Chief Lillian Williams became a case study in medical ethics courses, a cautionary tale in leadership seminars, and a reminder that appearances can be devastatingly deceiving. But more than that, it became a testament to the quiet strength of those who endure disrespect with grace while waiting for the moment when truth reveals itself. 3 years after the initial confrontation, a medical student rotating through Riverside Memorial asked Chief Williams about the incident. "How did you stay so calm?" the student asked. "When he was humiliating you in front of everyone, how did you not just explode?" Lillian smiled thoughtfully. "Because I knew something he didn't. I knew my worth wasn't determined by his perception. I knew my competence wasn't diminished by his disrespect. And I knew that eventually truth has a way of emerging, especially when you create systems that force it into the light." "Do you think he's really changed?" the student asked. "I think he's trying," Lillian replied honestly. "Real change is a process, not an event. What matters is that the system no longer protects people like him at the expense of people like me. That's the victory." The student nodded, absorbing the wisdom. "Remember this," Lillian added. "Never mistake silence for weakness. Never confuse humility for incompetence. And never, ever underestimate the person beside you, because you have no idea what they're capable of until you create the conditions for them to show you." This story isn't just about one arrogant doctor and one extraordinary nurse. It's about all of us. How many times have you witnessed someone being dismissed, disrespected, or underestimated because of their race, gender, or perceived position? How many times have you stayed silent when you knew something was wrong because challenging authority felt too risky? Here's what we can learn from Chief Williams and even from Dr. Thornton's eventual transformation. 1. Competence doesn't require validation. Chief Williams didn't need Dr. Thornton's approval to be excellent at her job. She knew her worth, her credentials, and her capabilities. His disrespect didn't diminish her. It revealed him. 2. Systems matter more than individuals. The real victory wasn't Dr. Thornton's humiliation. It was the systemic changes that made future incidents less likely. Building better systems protects everyone. 3. Silence can be strategic. Chief Williams didn't need to announce her credentials or defend herself in the moment. Sometimes the most powerful response is patient, strategic silence, knowing that truth will eventually emerge. 4. Accountability requires structure. Dr. Thornton wasn't held accountable until there were actual consequences backed by institutional authority. Change requires more than good intentions. It requires enforcement. 5. Redemption is possible, but must be earned. Dr. Thornton's story shows that people can change when confronted with the reality of their behavior. But that change must be demonstrated through sustained action, not just words. If this story resonated with you, we need to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us, where are you watching from? Have you ever been underestimated or dismissed in a professional setting? What would you have done in Chief Williams's position? Do you believe people like Dr. Thornton can truly change? Your voice matters. Your experience matters. Your perspective matters. If you believe respect should be the baseline in every workplace, hit that like button. If you think everyone deserves to be heard regardless of their title, share this story with someone who needs to see it. And if you want more stories about courage, accountability, and justice prevailing over arrogance, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss when we drop our next powerful story.